Okay, so is it live? Test 1, 2, test 1, 2. Okay, so is it live? I think we are live. Not sure. But I think so. I think I can close this one. Is there also a chat available somewhere? I thought there is. But I don't see it, so I need to open it. Let's go. Zip, zip. How do I get into the stream settings? I have no idea. I want to see a chat. If I would be a chat, where would I hide myself? Here. Open chat in new window. Okay. Test. Hi. I see messages. Maybe I also see messages from other people then as well. Whatever, I would say let's just start. So this is the first stream where we are going to develop an awesome game, a 2D-Platformer that no one has ever seen before. And for that, I, of course, prepared a little bit in my free time. And we want to start, of course, with the graphics that we are going to use. So what kind of tile sets and everything. And for that, I want to use this one here. So Pixel Adventure. There's already some examples that we can see. So there's this tiny little guy who is jumping on some platforms. Then they are going down. He's collecting some fruits. There I have my own ideas. There are also some saws. There are different characters. Not sure if we are going to use that one. There are like bombs in Super Mario, which can crush you. There it would be interesting to implement something that they can push you if the force is not strong enough, and that they will like kill you if they really stomp you if the force is too strong. Then we also have those kind of things here, those moving spiky balls. And yeah, so that's it. So we will start with that. I'm not sure if that tile set is contains everything, but I saw that a couple of months ago and I saved it so that I can use it for this tiny little project here. And the idea that I had is that the fruits will be part of the game. And actually, when you collect a fruit, something special will happen. So, for example, when you collect a pineapple, then you can do a double jump. So you can jump mid-air once more. If you collect another pineapple in mid-air, then you can jump once more. So it lets you jump in mid-air one time when you collect a pineapple, for example. With the cherry, I thought of some dash things. So if there would be a big gap between two platforms and with a normal jump you cannot reach it, then with the cherry you can just cross over it because you get a dash in the current direction where you are facing. Would also be possible, of course, to get over the gap if there would be pineapples. Then I thought of some transparency stuff. So maybe that's with the apple or the lemons or whatever that is. So that maybe certain platforms or walls in the game, you can go through them if you are like translucent, so if you're transparent or something. That would be another gimmick. And the last one, I'm not sure. Also not sure if we will be able to implement everything in time and get to all of my features. But before we start, so first of all, we really start from scratch. As I mentioned in one of the previous videos, it's a newly set up computer. I don't have prepared a lot of things. I'm not even sure if I have all the tools that I normally have for game development. So I might need to download certain things. And before we start, what I usually do is that I have a mind map, because I like to work in mind maps when I think about something, because my thoughts are usually a little bit chaotic, and with mind maps I can control them a little bit. And I think I don't have anything installed on this computer so far. No. So an app that I found recently in the App Store on my mobile phone was the Nice Mind map application. I think it was called like that. Exactly. And they, I don't know when, but they also have a version that you can use on your Windows computer. I hope that it works with Windows 11 as well. Let's see. And there we will start with just some brainstorming, what we want to do. Also break down a little bit the project in the different steps. So what we're trying to achieve every day, because what is important for me, at least normally, is that I work at least once a day, latest every other day, on such tiny little games, because if I don't do that, then normally I lose interest at some point and don't continue working on them. So for me personally, it's always important to do at least little steps every day. And I want to break them down a little bit for the first few days. I don't want to start too big, and sometimes it's also not very detailed out what kind of things I have in mind for a specific day, but I want to write down a little bit something, so not very detailed. So for example, one thing could be integrate tiled into our game engine or render a sprite. That could be a goal for one specific day, and that is what we want to achieve. Hello, Nev Datni. Hope you can hear me and you can also see the video and everything, that everything is great. It's the first stream on YouTube for me, so I'm not sure if everything is set up correctly. Also, you might notice that, but there is no background behind me. It's a specific plugin. If that is annoying, I'm not sure. So if this blurring stuff for pixelation that is always happening around my body, if that is annoying, then just let me know, because we could change that, just that you see that. If I remove that plugin, then you see the background behind me. And if I turn on the plugin, then you don't see that. But not sure which one you prefer, just let me know. Okay, so let's start with, can I remove those things here? Because I don't care about pre-existing mind maps. And let's create a new one. Okay, and here, how do we call this platformer? Let's call it Quilly Jumper. Do we have a Quilly Jumper game already? Let's call it Quilly Jumper. Quilly, so Quill Raven. Then all my games are usually Quilly stuff. That's coming from the Warcraft 3 mapping time many, many years ago. Hello, Xerox. It's better with the background. So you mean to have the background available instead of removing it? So something like that? Is it better like this? Then we can keep it. Maybe I need to make myself a little bit smaller, not sure. I can also move a little bit. I can move a little bit to the right, which might also help to center myself better. I'm starting in LibGDX as well so far. You had cool videos, props to that. Thank you. I think some of my tutorials are really outdated, so people still comment on the Java tutorial that I made, I think 5 years ago. Personally, I think that was not that good. I think it had some good concepts and I explained them good enough. but I think it's not one of my best tutorials. There are better now, better versions available. Get a green screen. Yeah, that would work, but I don't know if I have space for that in my room. Also, what I know with green screen, you also need better lighting conditions. I don't have that. I don't want to pay for that. I don't need a professional setup. So we have to live with what we have here. Okay, so let's plan, I would say, the first maybe 3 days, and then let's see how far we come. So we make day 1, day 2, and day 3. We can change here the color theme a little bit. So the one that I normally choose is, I think, that one here, that's the one that I like a lot. And day 1. So definitely what we want to do, we want to have the basic project setup. So we will use GDX liftoff for sure. We need LibGDX. We need the flex component system and all these other stuff. Then I also want to start already with tiled integration. And with that, I mean the rendering of the map, the support background and foreground layers, so something like that. To support that in a good way, most likely we will also need here a certain event system, so a game event, listener, dispatcher, something like that, so that we don't have to call methods directly when we change maps and so on, so that we can dynamically react to certain things. So for example, a map change and things like that. So I think that would be good. Doesn't have to be perfect on the first day, but that's already good enough. For the second day, I would say we want to spawn the game objects that are placed in tiled. So that is what I want to do on the second day. Also here, I want to integrate already, integrate Box2D for player character. And here I made some ideas already. So since I want to mainly use tiled for the game, and I like tiled a lot, I want to use it also for other things, not just map creation. And my idea was that normally when I use Box2D, a character or something is just a box or a circle, and I write that down in code to spawn all of that and create those bodies and fixtures and everything. And my idea was that maybe I do that with tiled, so that I have a separate map, which is maybe called like character collisions or whatever. And then for every character in the game, I can then draw with the collision editor in tiled. I can draw the shapes around my sprites and use that to create the Box2D body. With that, it should be fairly easy to use a shape like 2 circles, one on the head, one on the foot, and then in between a box to connect the head and the feet, something like that, and to be also more dynamic with when it comes to creating the fixtures. Because I think just having a box or a circle, while it works, I think it's not the best behavior when it comes to a platformer. And I really want to focus a little bit on the controls. So on day 2, the controls will be very bad. So we will just have some random impulse or force to move the character around. But that one I really want to improve to get a better control feeling and handling for the character, which I want to optimize then on day 3. So there I want to do something like, I saw that recently in a video, I think they called it coyote time. That's the time, if I remember correctly, when you go across a gap or a pit and the character is already falling. So it's at the edge or shortly after the edge of a platform, then you should still be allowed to jump, so that it doesn't have to be pixel perfect, so that there is a little bit of a tolerance, let's say, when you can jump before you fall. So something like that. And the other thing was, how was that called? There was the coyote time, and I think the jump buffering or whatever that was called. There, it would be maybe, do I have Paint or something? Yeah, Paint is the easiest program for me to draw something, to explain the idea better. So let's imagine we have a platform like this, and we have a character. Can I draw some points? Yeah. and we have a character which is currently falling. So something like that, tup, 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 and he's going downwards. So the way I usually implement it is that there is a sensor somewhere at the bottom of the character, maybe something like that. And when that sensor is in contact with a ground shape, then the player can jump. And normally that is rather pixel perfect. So if the character would be something like here, and visually maybe the sprite is already touching the ground, but because of the way I implemented it, the player is not allowed to jump because the shape, the collision shape for the feet or the sensor for the feet is not in contact with the ground. And there it's called, I think, jump buffering. So if the player would press the jump button at that moment, and then maybe 1 or 2 frames later, this shape is actually really then in contact with the ground, then the player will automatically jump. So there will be also like a tolerance time that you don't have to press the jump button at the perfect timing, so that you have a little bit of a tolerance as a player when you press the button, that you have some input buffering going on. So let me read the comment. I have seen all of them since I know Java as well and Kotlin, and usually I am more in app development. So the Kotlin one was way better because of the patterns you were using. Yeah, I think also since I learned a lot in the last couple of years, the way I do it now in Kotlin is also more a better approach than I did it back then with Java. If I would use Java, most likely it would be very similar to the way I solve things with Kotlin. Okay, let's see what we have here. We have that. So day 3, the coyote time, jump buffering, and in general, player movement or player control optimization. That would be day 3. I could imagine that maybe day 2 and 3 take a little bit longer, so that maybe already day 4. But I think that's already good enough. Then let's see. Then we would have a map. Also at some point, that would also be day 2. Let's see, here we also need to spawn the collision object for the tiled map. That is even before we start moving the player, because otherwise the player is always falling down if there is no collision. So we have a map, we have some collision objects for the map. For the different platforms, we would have then a player that we can control. There we have some control optimizations. I think that's already quite good. And then maybe on day 4, there we can implement the double jump feature, for example, with pineapple. Or I think that dash shouldn't be that difficult as well. So let's also try here. Whoop. I'm pressing crazy buttons. The dash feature with, I don't know, the apple or whatever fruit we want to collect. And then it goes on. For that time being, let's call it day X. What we still need, of course, is then some user interface stuff. We need music and sound effects. We need ideally some enemies that we want to have. But I also want to have at least one boss fight. So I want to have one special enemy that somehow you can hit, maybe by just jumping on its head or something like that. And that we have a little bit of a boss fight in there. And I also want to have more than just one map. So maybe 2 general platformer maps where we can play around a little bit with the features that we have implemented. And in total, let's make 3 maps. Third map contains boss, something like that. And I think that doesn't sound like a lot of features, but actually, if you only have 1 month time and you're not working on that full time, it's already quite some features. For the user interface, I want to try out something new, because for me, that was always some manual stuff going on with the layouts and everything, which I find quite annoying and tedious to work with. So there I want to use something that I saw on GitHub. I think it was called Scene Manager from Relus or whatever that guy is called. He also makes some nice LibGDX tutorials on YouTube for Scene 2D and other stuff. And the scene manager, from what I know, there's like a user interface, and there I can paste in my user interface graphics for the different frames, buttons, and so on. And then I can see how they would look like in my game. Also play around with it, enter some text and things, and check if the borders are correct. And I think it also, so if I would create then a menu with the different menu options, I think it can then also give me the code that I would need to use to get to such interface. So I think that should help as well. And with that, do we have then everything? Yeah, I would say. So for the enemies, let's implement or use this. How do you write Womp in Super Mario? Not sure. I think it's written like that. Maybe this Womp. And did we have something else? Maybe the chainsaw as well. That could be interesting. And the boss fight, there I'm not sure. Let's see what we have there. We have user interface, mouse, sound effects, a character control, maps with most likely some map transitions because we want to switch between 3 different maps. I think we are good to go. So first of all, let's start with GDX Liftoff. That's a great tool from the guy Tommy Ettinger, I think. Yep. And he's always pushing out releases, keeping it up to date with the Gradle versions and everything, Java versions, always bug fixing for some macOS stuff. Great guy, I love him. So let's use his tool to set up our project. And do I need something else? Let me think. The JDK, I think, gets downloaded automatically in JetBrains at some point. And is Windows now analyzing if this jar file is a virus or something? Is it finished? Yes, it's finished. So can I start it? Do I even have Java installed? Java minus version. Do I have that? Yes, we have it. Okay, so why can't I run it then? No idea. Let me open the console here. Java minus jar GDX liftoff stuff. Okay. So, name of the project, Quilly Jumper. Always try to avoid spaces or any other special characters because usually they cause some problems. At least in the past, it was always annoying because back many, many years ago when I started with C++ and some game development stuff, I always used spaces or dashes and things like that. And there were always some problems then when it comes to the paths, when you load images and stuff like that. That was always super annoying. So nowadays, usually I just write everything in lowercase. Let's actually just write everything in lowercase because it doesn't really matter. The game itself, then all the graphics can be whatever we want. Also the window title can be different, but the project itself, just to keep it safe, let's make everything in lowercase. Then name of the core project, Quillraven, GitHub, Quilly Jumper. But I think one of the more new approaches with Kotlin where you don't use Gradle. JetBrains implemented their own build system. There, I think you don't even need a package anymore, or by default, you don't have a package and just have the classes on the outside, on the root, under, I think, just a source folder, which I like, but just that you know it, why I use a package here is that when you upload it to the Google Play Store, at least in the past it was like that, the artifact itself had to have a unique package name. So I couldn't have 2 apps with the package name com Quillraven GitHub. That did not work. So that's why I always use my GitHub address, let's say, and then the name of the game that worked in the Play Store. Not sure if it's different nowadays, but that was a problem in the past. And the main game class, let's call it Schwilly Jumper. You can open it by double click. It will work. It didn't work. I tried it. It then opens this pop-up, and there most likely I would need to choose Java or something, but I don't know where Java is installed. I never checked the paths where Windows is installing something. I just press next, next, next and do it. I missed the start. Will you upload the video to YouTube? I hope so. I'm not sure, but I think the live stream hopefully gets stored automatically on YouTube. And if there is some special highlight or maybe just a short topic that I want to demonstrate, I thought of using how you call that? I think a video highlight where I cut it out and then just upload it as a separate video. That should work. You should choose Java, yes, but I think I would need to search it. Maybe it's under my username .jdk folder, I think there where JetBrains is downloading it, but not sure anyway. We have it open, so it's fine. Android, we won't target Android for that one. It's not very difficult to actually add an additional backend or target platform is the correct term, to add another target platform to your game. It's rather easy. So if we want to have Android in the future, we could do it, but to keep it simple, we don't add it. So we just have desktop, and actually I would like to have TVM. Maybe that's something new for you, but there is now also an easy version to host your game in the web browser. And I think I never made a video actually about that, so you maybe missed that, but our amazing Mystic Woods tutorial and also Mystic Garden, when you go on GitHub, there is a link now there, and you can play the game in the browser. Isn't that amazing? How did you move? There's some problems from what I know with the music and the sound. I think I need to allow this page to play some sound. And even there, I had some problems with TVM, which are already known, but doesn't really matter for my game, to be honest. But what I like is that when I have a GitHub repository, which for sure we will create, then we also have the possibility to run our platformer then in the browser. This is the TVM backend, so just that you have seen it. Also fairly easy to use. So let's add that as well. Languages. We want to have Kotlin. There is 1.923 from what I know. I think that was a release a couple of days ago. Extensions. We want to have AI. Do we really need AI? Maybe for the boss it would be cool. So let's add some AI. Box 2D for sure. Bullet, I think we don't need. Controllers, we could do that, but at the beginning, let's go with the normal keyboard input. We can add controllers later on. Free type, we don't need it. Tools, we also don't want to have that. That's it. Then third party, there we want to add, there are a lot of options. Flex, this guy also integrated my component system, which I like a lot, so I can add that automatically. Then, is there also some LibGDX stuff in there? Shouldn't there be some LibGDX stuff in there? There it is. So not sure which one of those we need. So for the starters, let's use the app. Assets async, not 100% sure. Let's add it later on if we need it. Box 2D for sure. Collections is always great. Graphics, internationalization. Yeah, I like that usually to have that available. So we could just develop it in English, everything, but I always like to have support. And since at least I can speak and write in two languages, German and English, let's support both of them. Inject we don't need. The logging is always nice. The math stuff is nice. Preferences we will need later on. That's something maybe here also for DX. Save load system. Let's add that as well, that we don't forget about that. Scene 2D we will need. Tiled integration we will need. By the way, I made this package here in LibGDX. I contributed to this open source project. I am amazing. So all the other stuff, I think we don't need it. The screen manager, I saw that on GitHub as well. That's an implementation where you can have some nice screen transitions. So for example, when you switch between the game screen and the menu screen, for example, and you don't just have an immediate change between those two screens, then with the screen manager, you can have things like that one screen is falling down from the top, or that the first screen is fading out and the second screen is fading in. It's a cool thing that I always wanted to look at. Maybe if we have time, we can have a look at this stuff and use it. All the other things, what the hell is Squid Squad? Never heard of that. I think that's it. Let's start with that. And templates, I'm not sure. Is there a Kotlin? Is there maybe even a LibGDX? Kotlin and KTX. That one sounds good. Yeah, I think that's it. And advanced. Yeah, I guess that's good. Generate the project. Why can I not generate it? Seriously, why can I not? I need to choose the folder, of course. So folder would be, what is the folder? C, Simon, is there some idea projects? And it needs to be the empty folder as well. So in here, we will create our Quilly Jumper folder, and that one is an empty folder, because that's always funny to me. Some installation programs, they use the name of the project as a folder and generate this folder automatically. So if I would enter it like this, I would have then projects, Quilly Jumper, and then inside the project files. And some installers don't do that. So hopefully this one is placing it directly there. Let's see, generate project, and setup complete. I am amazed. Okay. So let me read some chat messages again. First time seeing your face. Have a great stream. Yeah. Aren't you the guy that I helped a little bit with some mail conversation, and you had this cool project or something with one of the games, and you got an A grade or something? Or am I... are you a different person? Cannot remember. I think it was you. Is it the way to avoid GWT? I used GWT and it was horrible. Yeah, exactly. So TVM is the alternative for GWT. I think Kotlin, from what I know, doesn't work with GWT, with the Google Web Toolkit. And for that one, they created TVM, and there is this LibGDX TVM stuff, which helps with running the game in the browser. The next guy wrote it already. So GWT is not working with Kotlin. That's correct, and TVM can. GWT translates Java code to JavaScript. TVM works with Java bytecode, so it can work with any JVM language. But as I know, TVM created by Russians. Yeah. To be honest, I don't care who made it. It's important that it works. Okay, so let's start IntelliJ. And let's open our project, which hopefully is in the correct folder. Yeah, perfect. So there's not another folder called Quilly Jumper. It's just Quilly Jumper. Great stuff. Here with the theme, not sure. I hope it's readable for you. So it's a dark theme. Some people complained that they wanted to have a dark theme instead of a light theme, because the light theme, when you're watching on your phone in the dark, then you get blinded. And that's why they prefer a dark theme. So I will use for this tutorial series, if no one complains, it's not a tutorial series. For this stream project, I will use and stick to this dark theme. Okay, now the thing that developers love, waiting for the build system to download everything. It's always a great experience. Seems like it's already done, so that was quite fast. So what I want to change is, where is it? That one is okay. The versions, I think it's in the Gradle properties files. So we have KTX version 1.12.1, RC1. Is that the latest one? Let me quickly check. Let's just use the latest versions everywhere. 1.12.1, RC1. Okay, that's correct. Then Kotlin version is that one. AI version, I think there is a newer one. Isn't there 1.7.3 or something? 1.8.2. 1.8.2, no, so that's the latest. For Flex, I want to use the snapshot version actually. There is no feature changes between 2.6 and 2.7 snapshot. The only difference is that 2.7 snapshot is built with Kotlin 1.9.23 and some other version upgrades. So it just uses the latest versions of all the libraries internally. It also uses Gradle 8.6, if I remember correctly. I think this project is also using Gradle 8.6. Yeah, so it's just some version upgrades, just some minor stuff. Then we have Graal VM. Okay, I wonder about why. Not sure. Let's keep it. And then TVM. That one I'm also not sure if it's the latest version. Let's just quickly check. 09 GDX TVM. What? I think I'm on the wrong GitHub project. Nah, where is it? GDX TVM, it's that one. But I don't get it. Ah, no, here. 100B9. B9, great stuff. TVM version, something, I don't know. GDX version 1.12.1, I think should be good to go. If it's not a secret, whom are you working as Java developer? I was a LibGDX developer some time ago, but now I'm full stack. Quite interesting experience working as LibGDX dev. So do you mean where I worked? I worked for 10 years. I worked at Swarovski, if you know that. If you have a girlfriend and wife, most likely she will know it. They make these glass figurines and everything, also jewelry stuff. And there I worked in the IT sector for 10 years for a product lifecycle management program, where I started as a Java backend developer and also a little bit of front end with this rich client platform Eclipse stuff. And mainly in the last years, I was mainly doing some backend stuff and integration stuff with SAP and other third-party applications. And since 2 years, I work for another company, which is also a big one. It's called Entity Data. There's also Entity and other stuffs, but this one is Entity Data in Europe. I am working in the Austrian headquarter or branch of this company. And there, I think I'm not allowed to tell you where I work, but it's in the automotive area. And they're also currently mainly as backend developer, but hopefully, and I would be very excited if that comes to reality, I can work on some Angular stuff because they want to migrate certain things to an Angular front end with the latest version. So it would be cool to have some Angular experience. I know React a little bit and some other frameworks, very tiny experience with Angular, and would be cool to have some more front-end experience as well. Game development for me is just a hobby, and I usually use it to learn new stuff and concepts, because for me it's always fun playing around with that, and when I see something on the screen and can play around with it, that is what I normally use and like to learn something new. So we have now our game. We have the 2 backends. Let's quickly check. There should be a launcher for the Kotlin stuff, and that hopefully runs. Normally, when you click it on the first time, it doesn't launch anything. There is an error, but the second time, usually it's then working. Okay, worked the first time. We see the logo. I think that's it. We have an header. There's nothing new. Resizing is working. Good. So project setup complete. I think I need to refresh because I changed 1 or 2 versions. Yeah, legacy frameworks, they are, from my experience, that's the typical stuff that you have to deal with if you work in that area, unless you work for a very new company, startups, stuff like that, then you might work with newer stuff. But usually, if you don't work there, then you have to deal with very, very old stuff, unfortunately. But it is what it is. That's why we have our private projects where we can have some fun. Okay, let's also delete all these Java folders. I'm not sure why it's creating them. Actually, in my opinion, they are not necessary. So, main application. I think there's everything in there. We have KTX game. We most likely have some dependencies on all of that stuff, which is good. GDX AI. Here, I think expose stuff. I think that sounds good. So we can start with the basic project setup. And as mentioned, so for today, what we want to do, basic project setup is done. We can mark that 100%. Let's go. Close it. And next one would be the tiled integration. So let's create just a tiny little map, nothing fancy, just that we can work with something, a little bit, some background, foreground layers, and then render that with the entity component system already so that we have a clean system and integration for that. And that would be the goal for today. So what we need for sure is a sprite patch. So we have definitely something of type patch, which in our case will be initialized late, but a long time that I haven't, that I worked with Kotlin actually. So we have then the by lazy, and there we just create a sprite patch and with normal shader, and the initial size I think is 1024 or something. So about 1000 sprites. Yeah, it's just 1000. So I think that it has up that you can buffer up to 1000 sprites before it's doing a flush, if I remember correctly. I think that's the size. And we actually, most likely, we won't need that. For us, it should be sufficient to maybe have 100 or 200, but let's just keep it with the default values. That's it. Then we need to dispose there something. And that's, do we also need to call here super? No, there is no special implementation. So we dispose it safely. That's an extension function from LibGDX. And simply, if there would be anything going wrong when we dispose the resource, then we won't get an error or exception, which in our case with the batch is good enough. It's anyway at the end of the game, when you close the game, we don't care if it couldn't free any of these resources because we anyway cannot handle that error, to be honest. Good, then we want to have some screens. So let's create here a new package. Most likely I also need to zoom in a little bit for you guys so that you can see the editor in a better way. And how do we call the first screen? Let's start with a simple game screen. And that's a KTX screen. And that's it. And what does it need? It needs for sure the patch. And not sure, does it need to store it? Maybe not. Let's keep it like that. So back to our game here. So instead of this first screen that we can remove here, let's get rid of all of that stuff. We don't need it. We want to have here our game screen, which takes the sprite patch. And we want to switch to our game screen. So that should already work. Next thing is that we need some initial setup for our entity component system that we can create systems and everything that we are going to use in combination with the tiled map. But let me think, do we want to start with that now or do we do that later? Maybe for now we just want to load the map and render it directly, and then later on move that into our entity component system framework. I think we will do it like that. So let's create a little map in tiled, and for that we need our tileset stuff. I closed the browser. Yes, I'm very smart from time to time. So let me grab the assets once more. So it was this one here. In case someone is interested, as I mentioned, there will be the GitHub repository, and usually I make then the credits to the different assets that I use. So you will find the links there. But if someone is interested, I just posted it in the chat, and we will download it for now. We don't want to pay for the time being. Let's download it and let's make, not sure, shall we do, here I have an assets folder. Oh, I downloaded that already once. Aha, okay, that's good. So I forgot about that. We would need the map. Where's the map? So that is BAT-B something. That all sounds not very interesting. Terrain. That one sounds good. Is it that one? Yeah, that looks like platforms. Good. So let's... Oh, not sure. I want to move that actually to the game project folder itself and create there a raw folder with the raw assets that we have used for everything. Raw assets. So let's put it in there. And what we would need to do now is that we need to split this graphic, because maybe from the tutorials you know it, but I know it from experience. When you use a graphic like that directly, then you get some problems when you render it in LibGDX, because normally you have then some lines or rows in your tiled map, so you will have some gaps. So instead of having, can I make here something? Let's remove all of that. So normally you have tiles which have a fixed size, so something like 16 by 16, and you want to render it like that so that they are perfectly aligned. But if you use a graphic like you get it from itch.io, for example, then you have a problem that sometimes when you move the camera, then you will get a line in between tiles, or in this case, it would be a column or a line in between the tiles. And the problem is, from what I know, some accuracy with floating point numbers, that when the texture gets drawn pixel by pixel, that sometimes the pixel is maybe not correctly picked and it's picking something outside of the texture or in between, and then the wrong pixel ends up on the screen. I think something like that. And to avoid that, you can simply add some gap, how's it called? Padding. I think padding between the different tiles so that they are in the original graphic, that they are not next to each other. So there would be some padding in between them. Usually you also just replicate the edge pixel here for 2 or 3 pixels, because then with this inaccuracy of the rendering, it still picks the correct color for the pixel and the rendering is then simply correct. To be honest, I only had that in LibGDX. I remember back then with some C++ stuff that I did with different frameworks. There I never had this problem. But with Java game development and especially with LibGDX, there was this problem. So I always need to add this gap stuff. And the first thing that we need to do is now to split this graphic. And there I wanted to check something. If the GDX texture packer can actually unpack, I guess. No, that I would need to have an atlas and then it splits the atlas up in the different images. Okay, that makes sense. I was hoping that in there I can somehow split the graphic. Since I cannot do that, I'm wondering, do I have Image Magic installed or is it called just Magic? I have it there. That is great because I think I made a screenshot on my phone a couple of days with the commands that we need. Yep, I think I have it. That's great. So let's go to our raw assets. So this is a 16 by 16 graphic. Is that true? I think that's not a multiple of 16, right? Or is it? Okay, it's 22. That's okay. And this one, it's 11. Oh, everything is correct. Good, good. So, let's go inside the folder. By the way, if someone has here a better approach to do that, I would greatly appreciate it because that one is always time consuming as hell. So we need magic, I guess. I'm not sure if that is correct. Then the name of the graphic, which was that one. And then minus crop 16 by 16 and how we want to call it, the different stuff. So that would be then Terra underscore and %02D dot PNG so that it creates the different tiles out of that image. Is that working? Okay, it did something. Okay, that looks actually quite good. I'm surprised. Here it looks very pixelated, but I think that's just the preview of Windows. It's not actually pixelated like that. It's zoomed in a lot. I think we should be fine. So that was one of the tougher parts. So let's create a new folder. Let's call it and move all that stuff in there. And now we can group that together to a real texture atlas, which is what we want to use, because there we can adjust the padding and everything. So that one we will call Terrain Atlas. Output directory can be that's the wrong folder. Output directory will still be in the raw assets folder, I would say. Or no, let's put it in the main assets folder. Actually, that's where we want to have it. Let's create there a subfolder called graphics, and there another one which is called... okay, so that's the folder. What does it mean? Okay, and it's called... that's good. And input file is from our raw assets folder. That folder, and there just pick everything. What? Can I not add a folder here? Add input files, add ignored files. I thought you could add here an entire folder. Am I mistaken? It seems like so. Then let's add... now I did it. Maybe I picked something wrong before. Not sure. Good. So PNG, blah, 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 16 by 16, blah, blah, blah. And here, so this padding stuff, we want to increase that now to 4. I think is always a good number that worked for me. And what else do we need? So duplicate padding, edge padding, all of that is good stuff. Foursquare, we don't really care. Grid layout, I think we cannot enable it because there is some bug then in the created texture with the offsets, if I remember correctly. So let's pack it. And that looks pretty disgusting. Let me think, because of course I don't want to have the different types here split up like that. And if I remember correctly, didn't I show you in one of the tutorial series a so-called tile extruder program? If I remember correctly. Didn't that keep the original graphic and just added some padding in between? Wasn't that tool the holy grail that I always wanted to use? Make sure you have Node installed, which I currently don't have, but I can install it for sure. But I think that's it. I think that one keeps the original graphic and just adds the padding in between. I think that is what we want to have. But wasn't that also a command that I could run in with npx or something? Let's follow the instructions. And hello, I cannot pronounce his name. Krzysztof Chetabariski. Okay, so latest stable version. Let's go. Install Node, accept everything. Good enough. The first one, I guess, is just a Christoph, but in a very Russian way or Eastern Europe way to write it. Note that this will also install something. Nah, I don't want that. Thank you. A Russian guy that sorry if I say Russian, but for me that's just a Russian letters. It's not Russian letters. I know there is a general term for that, but I cannot read them. But thank you. I give my best. Okay, so now we should have npm, I hope. Most likely we need to start a new console. Then let's go back in here. Do we have Node Package Manager now? Yes, we have. And we want to install Tile Extruder globally, which hopefully also works. And then we want to call it like this. So tile width, tile height, input, output. That's great. But I want to have a margin. An example used for with pixel margin and 10 pixel spacing. What's the difference between margin and spacing? I always forget that. Is margin from the edges, so left, top, right, and bottom, and spacing is in between the tiles? Is that the difference between margin and spacing? Because then we just want to have that one. Here it's explained. So margin is from the edge and spacing is in between the tiles. Okay. So we have 16 by 16 as well. We want to have a margin of 4. We want to have a spacing of 8. What we could also do, minus extrusion. There we pick 2 instead of 1 pixel. And I think that should be it. Input is a completely different file. So that one is called, it has a stupid name. It has a really terrible name. We rename it. Something like that. So there we have then original PNG, and output would be, let's call that, it's the same folder. And there we just call it extruded. Does it work like that? No. What was wrong? Die Datei kann euch geladen werden. Oh, I cannot run the script for some reason. Can I run it now? Maybe in PowerShell it's not allowed, but maybe in the normal command line I can do it. Non-integer number of rows or columns found. The image doesn't match the specified parameter. Double check your margin, spacing, tile width, and tile height. 16 by 16. Margin 4, spacing 8. Shouldn't that work? Maybe it doesn't pick up the correct image. Let me check something. I think it's without the dot, maybe. Okay. No such file or directory. We called it original. Okay. Non-integer number of rows or columns found. Why? I don't get it, isn't it? Why is that not working? I hate it. I hate it so much. But it is correct. We just counted it before. It's 22 times 16 by something times 16. Yeah, I think 11 times 16. Why doesn't it work? I'm disappointed. Anyone has any idea? Or is there maybe a plugin for GIMP which could help us? Or did I write the command incorrectly? No, it's 16, margin 4, spacing 8. Maybe let's remove the extrusion. Does it just work like that? That one worked, funny enough. But now it's an exact copy, right? It's not an exact copy. What did it do? I don't get it. 0, 0, number of pixels to be extruded. the extrude. Okay, I get it. I think margin and spacing is part of the input file. Yeah, and extrusion is actually the number that I want to have. Okay. I think I got it now. So what we need is an extrusion of 4. That is what, yeah, exactly. That is what we want to achieve. So now I have it. Now we have almost the same image as before, but we should now have a margin of 4 pixels, which is perfect. And that one we keep in our assets folder. So let's remove the logo. Let's remove all of that stuff. And now we should be good to go to start in tiled. I never used the project, but I want to start using it and just experience it. So in this project, we will also use a tiled project. Not sure how that helps us or what it does, but maybe it's good in some way. So let's keep it at the root. Let's call that tiled project. Okay, I think I can organize things in here, I would assume. So now we want to have a new map. I don't know, base 64 with compression. Okay. Then we don't need a big one. It's for now. Let's use a 10 by 10 map. Then we have 16 by 16 pixels. And it's supported by LibGDX. Which one? Sorry, maybe I missed a chat message from you. So then we also have a new tile set. There we can now pick our newly created graphic. And that one should have, why is it German? So Seitenrand 4 and the distance between, so the margin is 4 and the spacing should be 8. It's 16 by 16. Okay. Let's also try that. So there we have, let's create a new folder which we call maps, and there we store all the map stuff. Does that look correct? I think that looks good, right? Looks perfect. A 2D editor for platformers. Okay. So, I saw a video recently how you can convert stuff like this into a so-called terrain tool, but I'm not sure if it works with that. So what I mean with that is that in Tile there is a functionality which is called, where is it? Terrain set, this one. And there you can add a corner set, an edge set, or a combination of corner and edge set. We would have here a corner set, I would say. And what you would do now here is something that, I don't know, let's call it dirt. And now I would need to mark all the tiles which have a dirt corner, or where there is a corner which is of the tiled type dirt, which would be, for example, here it would be everything, here it would be everything. So all of that would be dirt. But here it's only those two corners, here it's that one. So it would look something like that. And then we would have another type here, which we could call grass, for example. And the grass would be, so all of that. I'm not even sure. I think maybe just the top edge here, and here it would be those 4 things. That one here would actually be dirt, so something like that. And then when we would go to our map, there would be a terrain brush, and then we can just draw a grass or dirt, and it will automatically render the correct tiles here. But I think with that tile set here, it's not really working, because what we would need for every possible scenario, we would need one specific tile. What I mean with that, here we have the single case, so that the grass corner is at the top right, bottom right, bottom left, and top left. Then we would also need, of course, the edges, so top, bottom, left, and right, and also the entire graphic, so the full tile, for example. Then it would work. And also we need a counterpart with the exactly the same things. Since we don't have that here, I think that won't work. And what we can do, I think I made a video about that as well. We could use the auto mapping feature, which we might do at the end if there is some time. So let's add it here as a reminder that we don't forget about it. So that could make life easier, especially if you want to make multiple maps and work with this tile set multiple times. Then setting up some auto mapping tools that creating those platforms and the background and everything is way easier. That would be worth some time to invest, but for the time being, we don't use any of that. Also on the first day, we don't need to go overboard with the stuff that we want to do. So we can keep it very simple. And for now, let's make different layers. So let's say one layer here is called ground. So that would be something like, let's make it very big, something like that. So that would be the ground. Then we have here some dirt below. And maybe one more of those. So copy and paste it. And then we have here the final piece at the bottom. Like this. Then let's create another layer, which we can call decoration. We don't have any decoration, but just that we see that that would work then in the end, that we have multiple layers. So maybe like this, then it looks a little bit more exciting. Then we would somewhere have our player stuff and the enemies and so on. So that we would have an object layer where currently we don't place anything in it. Also, the LibGDX tiled map renderer doesn't render these objects automatically, so it wouldn't do anything at all. But for us, it would make the difference between if a layer should be rendered in the back of an object or in the front. In the past, I always used some naming conventions here, so that this one has to be, for example, called background, background, and the other things need to be called foreground something. But I'm not a big fan of such naming conventions and that you need to keep track of all these hidden rules that you implement in your game engine. So nowadays, or in this project especially, I will just use the layer ordering from tiled and use the same ordering in the rendering process, which I think makes it easier. Then you can name layers the way you want and you don't need to stick to a specific naming convention. So let's make one last one, which we call foreground, for example. And there we render, what does this tile map have? I don't know, maybe that little forest stuff here, that there's some trees coming from the top or things like that. I don't know. Let's make it very, very small. And that's it for our first map. So I think that's good enough to test out certain things and to implement certain things so we can save that. So in our assets folder, we have a maps folder, and let's call that test map. So that would be the first map. We also might use that map for some testing later on, so that we don't just use it for now, but also later on in separate tests where we want to verify certain things. Then we have a separate test map. Good. With that, I would say let's go back now to our code. By the way, one more question. Do you want to have some background music? Because I could add, of course, some non-copyright, chill out programming music if you want, or if you find that distracting, then of course we can keep it like that. So you just hear me talking. Unfortunately, you won't hear any typing. So if there are some guys out there which like to hear some mechanical keyboard sounds, then you will be disappointed. I cannot give you that. But it's up to you. So I don't have a problem if there's some background music. But if that's maybe too distracting, then we can keep it like that. So, wow, out of my memory, I need to remember a few things now. So first of all, my voice is also fine. So, okay, then for now, let's keep it without the music, unless there are multiple people who want to have some music. I need to think now, how was that loading working, if I remember correctly? So first of all, there are multiple things now that we need to do. We need to have some sort of asset management, because I don't just want to load things directly here in a screen or somewhere else in our game. We want to have an asset manager, of course, which takes care also of the reference counting. So if we loaded a map does not make sense, but if we loaded a certain asset maybe 2 or 3 times, and we unload it just 1 or 2 times, that we still keep it in memory, and only at the end, if all references are, or if the reference count is 0, then the resource gets disposed. So all that stuff is usually taken care of by an asset manager. So we will definitely integrate an asset manager. That is part 1. Part 2 is that we need this TMX map loader, I think it's called, to load the tiled map. And part 3 is the tiled map renderer, which is then rendering our map. And there we also want to, we'll start, of course, using a viewport for our game and render it in the correct viewport. And we will also introduce already I think it's called unit scale in the tiled map renderer, because later on when we introduce box2D, normally you have a conversion ratio between the meters in the physics simulation. So 1 meter refers to, in our case, most likely 16 pixels. And that's the unit scale, or sometimes you also read ppm, so pixels per meter ratio. That one we also want to introduce. Your voice is the best music. TMX map load, it's called like that. That's great. Okay, with assets, I think I never did that in my tutorials in the past, but what I want to do, or what I do nowadays, also I did that in this proof of concepts project, is that I actually wrap the assets in a separate class. Why do I do that? So why do I make now here a separate class? It's actually a file, there will be multiple stuff in it, which we will call assets. Why don't I use the asset manager from LibGDX directly? Or there would also be an asset manager from LibGDX. There is also an implementation from that guy, which is working with coroutines, which is quite cool, because I used it in one of my games where I had a loading time of, I think, was it 6 seconds or 7 seconds to load all the assets? And with his multi-threaded, or it's not threaded actually, with his coroutine implementation of assets loading, it went down to, I think, 1.5 seconds, something like that. It was really impressive. And the reason why I did that is, I explained it now a little bit. For now, for example, imagine you are now developing your game, and everywhere you use the libgdx, I need to have a main function, I think. And there should be the asset manager from libgdx. Let's imagine we use that everywhere in our code base, and impressive, cool stuff. We have that available, asset management is working. But later on in our development of the game, we find out, hey, there's a new cooler asset manager. There's coroutine stuff, and I want to have it. It's loading faster. It has better functionality. It has a nicer Kotlin syntax. So let's switch that. And that would be quite annoying because everywhere where you have now this asset manager reference, you would need to replace it with your with the coroutine asset manager implementation. And that is, of course, not good. That's why nowadays I usually wrap that. So I just have my own assets class with all the functions that I need. And internally, of course, this class uses then either the LibGDX asset manager or the LibKTX one or a custom implementation. And if I ever want to change that in the future, then I just need to do that inside my wrapper, change the functions around. And I don't need to touch any other code because everything outside is still working with my own assets class. And that's way easier and a better architecture, let's say, in our game than just using this reference everywhere. Normally, I mean, in my games, I normally never switch the asset management. I did it once in this Quilly Jumper project. Was that called Quilly Jumper? No, I think it was called Quilly Adventure. There I actually really changed from the GDX one to the other one. And there I had to adapt certain places to make the loading work again. And to avoid such kind of issues, we will just do what I just said. Create some facade adapter for any asset manager. Yeah, exactly. It's more like a facade. So it's a facade pattern. You are correct. So I will just call that, I like short class names, so I will just call it assets. And in here we will have an asset manager, which is currently, we will just stick to the LibGDX asset manager. What does that one need? I think this file handle resolver, but that one anyway, I think always goes to the local file handle stuff and it can read then the assets folder directly from what I know. Then we will have, or what I normally like to have is different enumeration classes and for different asset types. And we will have here one which is called map assets. Here I always struggle, is an enumeration called in singular or in plural as a best practice? Let's see. What is the best practice for naming an enumeration? Singular or plural? Do use a singular type name for an enumeration unless its values are bit fields. Do use a plural type name for enumeration with bit fields as values. This seems to be some Microsoft conventions. Oh, there was Java one. We use Kotlin, I know, but let's check it here. Enums in Java should be singular. Okay, also singular. So let's call it map asset. Singular for each class. Yeah, seems like that. And there we have one which we called now test. Then that one alone does not really help us. So this asset also needs to have a path, which in our case is in the maps folder. And there we have this test tmx map. So we also need that here. Path string. That's it. Then here in our, do we use the init method or do we use we actually use the asset manager here. So we want to set a specific loader and there we want to have a tmx map loader and file handle resolver. I think we also don't need to pass anything. How do I need to call it? I need to have the type variable. So is it tmx tiled map or tiled map? Maybe just like that. I really forgot how to call that method. Seems like it needs to be called like that. what is the difference between taking asset manager as a parameter and making asset manager parent class and assets inherit from it? You are actually right. It would be better to have it as an argument for the constructor, because when it comes to testing, and maybe you want to have then here a different file handler resolver for your tests. So maybe you don't go to the local files, you go somewhere else, or just want to have your own file handler resolver during the tests. Then with the implementation that I choose here, you are screwed, because that is just some internal stuff and you cannot configure it. So it would actually be better to pass it from the outside. For that scenario here, since I know that this file handler resolver will never change, it's just the way it is. So I don't want to pass an argument here. We could still actually use that as a default value when it comes to passing in here an asset manager. I think we cannot use the apply function here. So that single line of code would need to be in the constructor of the class. But that one could be the default value, so you don't need to pass it here. Would actually be better, but again, as I said, I think for me in that project, I'm pretty sure that I will never change, or I never want to configure the internal asset manager which is used in that class. And with having it here as a field, I can call the apply stuff and set the loader here directly. It's a minor thing, it's nothing big, but that would be my arguments for that. And you mean with inheritance. So why we don't use here asset manager as an inheritance? First of all, the asset manager has tons of functions that we don't want to use directly. And also, as I said before, later on, you might want to use a different asset manager. And if you inherit from it, then you have the same problems that I described before. So all the functions which got called maybe somewhere in your code base, they won't work anymore with the new asset manager that you are using. So that's why inheritance here, in my opinion, would not be good. And in general, I personally nowadays try to avoid inheritance because it makes code debugging sometimes really, really crazy when you have lots of levels of inheritance. And I speak from experience. So in the companies that I worked so far, and also sometimes the software tools that they are buying from certain companies, there you have like 10 to 15 levels of inheritance, and it's really, really hard to understand what is then going on in the background. And you see that because with every little version fix that they, or version update that they deploy or push out, there are always bugs in it, because in my opinion, no one can understand what is the side effect when I have like 10 classes in an inheritance tree and I change one tiny little bit somewhere. How would I know what kind of impact that has in 7 or 8 other classes which are inheriting from me? So that's, in my opinion, try to avoid that. And if you have to use it, sometimes it makes sense, of course, but then keep it at the lower level. Never go, I would say 2 levels is maybe acceptable, but never try to go 3 or more levels with inheritance. Just my personal opinion. Okay, what do we want to do? So we want to have a load function which takes in, let me think, which takes in a map asset, and it returns, to keep it easy, it returns a tiled map. Isn't there a TMX tiled map? No, it's just a tiled map. Which makes sense. I think the tiled map is a general implementation for all the different tiled editors out there, but internally they all work the same. Okay, and what we want to do, so with the LibGDX asset manager, it should be quite simple. We want to load something. And what do we want to load? We want to load from that asset that we get in here. let's just call it asset. It's clear by the type that it's a map asset. So there we want to get the path. And there's a KTX extension, which hopefully allows me to pass in here the tiled map, which is great. And we also, so loading just means that it would now try to load it in the background continuously. So we would need to call is it called update function? Exactly. But here, that game is very small. We don't need to have everything perfect here. So we just want to call here finish loading, which now finishes the loading of the assets that we just did here before. And with that, we can also return from our asset manager a specific asset, which would be, I think, again like that. And again, we pass in the asset path as a key. It seems like we don't need to specify the type here because that is somehow dynamically retrieved. So that should already work. So when we have now assets somewhere, we can call load mapAsset.test. That loads our tiled map and we should be able to use it. Let's try that out. So assets. One more thing. What we also for sure need is that we want to dispose our assets, and there we call them the dispose methods of the asset manager internally, which then frees up all the resources that we are loading somewhere. Good. So that means, of course, everywhere in our game, we want to have access to our assets. There we can use now our own implementation. And I think that one I can actually assign, though I cannot assign it directly, because I think that one also needs the OpenGL context to get access to the underlying file handling logic or file accessing logic. So I think we also need to use here by lazy. Just to explain it here, this is more like a life cycle. So a game in LibGDX has a different life cycle in the background, and certain things you cannot directly create in the constructor of your main class, because LibGDX, when it gets started in the background, it creates an OpenGL context, which you need for rendering all the stuff. Most likely also some OpenAL stuff for audio management, that you can play music and sound. And I could imagine that also file or resource accessing is also part of that context. And that context is available once the create lifecycle function of your game is called. So in the Java applications, usually you see a lot of declarations in the game class, and then in the create method, everything gets assigned and created. But in Kotlin, we can use this by lazy, which simply means the first time the getter of the batch or assets property or field in that case gets called, then the part in here gets executed. And internally by lazy is rather simple. Not sure if we can read that somewhere, but it's basically something like this. If resource equals null, then assign it. Resource equals whatever you do here in by lazy. And if it's not null, then it returns this resource here. That is basically the implementation of that. Nothing fancy or magical happening here in the background. Good, so assets, we want to dispose them, and the assets, of course, need to be part also of our game screen. So let's add that here. So in our game screen, we have now access to our assets, and there is a show method, which I think has no basic implementation. It's just an interface, right? It's KTX screen. Yes, it's just an interface. So what we want to have here, we want to try out assets. Why can I not call the load function? Because I'm an idiot. So now I can call the load function. And there we want to have math as a test. Let's assign that. And very quickly, let's print it out. But also let's make a breakpoint to see if that works. Will you use flex as ECS? Yes, that would be the intention. And that is also, once we have this loading of the map now working and the rendering, then we will convert it to the flex entity component system approach, and we will have a render system for that. And that would be the end of day 1 for me then. So then I'm happy if we have that basic setup available. So we have a map, which is an instance of something which looks good. It has hopefully some layers. It has 4 layers, which is correct. So that looks good. I think that is the map that we want to have. And of course, we don't show anything here. Currently, it's black, which is okay for us. Because what we need now is a map renderer, which is orthogonal tiled map renderer, correct. There we need to pass in our map, which at the beginning we don't have it available, so it's simply null. We want to pass in our batch so that it doesn't create another batch internally. And we want to pass in a unit scale. The unit scale, we didn't specify it yet, but we will do that in a moment. And there we use just here a companion object. There we have the unit scale. And as mentioned, for us it is simply 16 pixels equals 1 meter in box 2D. So that is this conversion ratio that you might see in other articles as well. And that is our unit scale that we want to introduce here. Okay, I quickly need a small break. And that you don't have here absolute silence. I give you here just some music. I hope it's not too loud. And I'll be back in about 5 minutes, maybe 10. See you. So, welcome back. Good. We have now the map loading and everything. We have the map renderer, which at that point here below, we want to set the map. Maybe that's not part of the map interface. Let me check. Yeah, so we want that one. There we assign this tiled map here. And then below we want to override the render method. And there we simply want to call, for now, just a render function, which then just goes through all the layers and renders it. So that won't work yet because of unit scaling and everything. So what we also need is stage. So there we want to have a game, not stage, how is it called? Game viewport. And there we want to assign, so that can be any viewport, and we want to use extend viewport, I think it's called. And there we work now in our world unit. So let's say to the left, we want to see, currently our map, I think, is 10 by 10, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So let's say we want to see 10 to the right and, I don't know, 5 to the top. Does that make sense? We can adapt those numbers later on. That's not a problem. So that's the minimum world width, and it needs to be a float. Okay, so it's 10 to the right, 5 to the top. And before we render, we need to call the apply function. And with that, we should hopefully see a part of the map at least. Let's see. Which we don't. I'm quite disappointed. I know why. Because there is the set view function also from the map, and there we need to pass in our camera where it doesn't know that it's an orthographic camera, which we... What is actually happening if we pass in here the camera? It gets adjusted. And what does it use internally? Doesn't it? It creates a new orthographic camera. So it's just like that. So let's also do that here. Let's call it game camera. That's an orthographic camera. And we pass that in here so that it uses that one. And here we can now pass it in. And hopefully now we can see the map. We still don't see the map. What's wrong? Of course, there's also something which is called resize. And there we need to call the viewport resize or update. How is it called? Update. With width, height, and we want to center. And now I believe we are good to go. Ha! Perfect. And you're correct, map renderer has a dispose function. We need to dispose that as well. Okay, but good. So what this extend viewport is doing. So now it shows almost the entire map, I think. So it simply does extend how much you can see to the right and to the top. So when we have different sizes, so let's make that one small. As you can see here, so now we would see, I don't know, 11 tiles to the right and 5 is still the height here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if we get smaller, so our application gets actually higher from the screen, then we see here the top. And I'm not sure if that's actually a good viewport to use for a platformer, because of course we don't want that players can see a different amount of the map depending on their device. I think that doesn't really make sense. Let's fix that. So first of all, dispose. We want to dispose the map renderer. Thanks, I forgot about that. And the viewport should be maybe just a stretch viewport. Or is it, I think it's called fit viewport. I think that's the one. So now we always have 10 by 5. I think that should be good. Yeah, so now it's centered, of course, in the screen. But it's 10 by 5. And if we would switch that to 7, then we should see a little bit of the top of our map. I think for now we will go with that viewport. I think that's good. Okay, that's working. Center camera here is most likely also not correct, because the camera will be focused on the player later on, and that one gets updated most likely every frame, so it doesn't really matter, but I think we should say here false for the time being. Yeah, exactly. So 0, 0, or the center is here now, so that's why the map is here. That makes more sense to me than in the future. Okay, so for now we keep it true. Ja, wir haben vergessen, das Foto schicken, Valvorik. Kommt noch, kommt später. Yeah, I think that's the basic setup, right? So we didn't split yet between background layer and foreground layer. We will do that in the render system. I think that's a better way to do it. And also the load function here is actually, we can do it better in Kotlin. That would be the operator function. Or it's just operator. Is it called, I forgot it. Is it operator function get, I think? And there we want to have that one. Or is it called operator get? No, operator function get. Because with that little change, we get a little nicer syntax for now, which is that. So that one means we want to access an asset, and if it's not there, it simply gets loaded. Your language wants to invade my country. No, no, no. Our language and the country where we are from, we don't want to invade anything. We are neutral. Good, I'm happy with that. Let's now convert all of that to an entity component system approach. So that's a little bit of overhead for now with what we want to do, but that helps us in the future and makes it then easier to add other functionality to our game. So what we need here is, so viewport stuff, all of that we need, but now we need a world, which is called configure world in Flex, which I also did not use for quite some time. So I also need to remember the stuff from my head. And there should be, how did we call it? I think it was called injectables. And there I want to add now a dependency, which is the game viewport. And we also want to add the game camera. So those two things, that is just a viewport. So for now, that shouldn't be a problem, but there is also a version that we can give it a name. So I would call that for later on. We don't need it for now. But the game viewport, because there will also be a user interface viewport, and we want to distinguish between those two in the dependency injection. For the camera, we just need the game camera. I think we don't need the user interface camera, so we can keep it like that. And we also want to add the assets, and we also add the batch as an injectable. And the only thing for now that we need is a system, and there we add, let's call it a render system. And that should be it. So let's create a new package, which we call system. And there we will have a class which is called a render system. And the render system is for, we don't have any components yet. So for now, it will be just an interval system, which is called every frame by default, if I remember correctly. Download sources. I hope that works. Yes, so by default, it's each frame and enabled. So that should be exactly what we need. And we want to implement a method which is called onTick. And our system needs a couple of arguments. So it has access to the batch, which we want to inject. How is that called? Okay, it's like that. And let's make it like this. And we also need do we need access to our assets? Actually, we don't, but we need access to our game viewport, which we can get via the name. And that's now really it, right? So from our game screen, all the render logic that we have here will now be part of our system. So we need the game viewport, which is not a batch. I'm rather stupid. It's a viewport that we apply, and the map renderer will be created internally of the system. So we move that one here also inside our system, which can have a dispose function. And there we dispose our map renderer. So we also don't need that back here in the screen. It's not necessary anymore. And in the render method of our screen, we need to call the update method of our world with the delta time that we get here. I think, are we going to use stage for rendering images or just using sprite batch to render them? Yes, I think in Mystic Woods we use the stage to render stuff. And I think it has some benefits because the image class has some cool functionality where you can scale the image, and it's always, you can define how it should be rendered, if it's centered inside that rectangle or scaled outside and things like that. But what I didn't like about that you always had to clear the entire scene graph and then build it up again every frame, because you could not do an easy way of sorting something. So that's why we will stick to the sprite patch, and most likely we'll just use the patch directly. And thank you for reminding me. Of course, we need to call here the dispose function also of our world, that the system gets disposed correctly. Nice catch. Good. Let me quickly go back to the system. I think that's it. The batch we don't need. I think we might need it later on. What we also did not get yet is the game camera, which we still want to have. Oh, it needs to be an orthographic camera, otherwise it doesn't work here. Yeah, so something like that. The batch we will need later on to render the entity. So even the IDE tells us that this is not used yet. It will be used in the near future. So we keep it, and I think we can try it. So that one should give us now the same result as we had it before. No, because we are loading here the map and the system doesn't know about that yet. So what we need to do is what I mentioned as last point here. So we need some game event stuff. Like in this case, we need an event like map change or map loaded or whatever. And then whatever logic in our game, in that case, the render system, if they need to react to something, then they can do that to those with those events. Camera, we are injecting viewport for camera. Are we? No, I think that should be fine. So we have the game camera here, with the game viewport here, assets and batch. I think that should be correct. Good. In the render system, inject. Yeah, there you are, correct. Good. Good. So we need some event system. Let's also create here just a file for now. Let's call that events. And there we will have a sealed interface that we call game event. That's it. And there we have a data class for in the future, I think it will be called map change event, I would say, which is a game event. And what kind of information do we need here? We need to have the tiled map to which we want to, or to which we want to change. So something like this. Then we also need, that one can be an object. We just need one of them. It's a game event. Let's call it dispatcher. And that one, what does it have? For now, most likely very simple, just a list of game event listeners. Let's do that here as well. So game event listener, what kind of function does it have? It has a function on event, and there it gets a game event. I think that's the simplest approach that we can implement for now and which suits our needs. And this event dispatcher to also, for simplicity reasons, for now it's just an empty list of game event listeners. And you can register here. Let's call it register. And there you can add a game event listener, which simply adds the listener to the list. Oh, there we need a mutable list of. Then you can, is it called unregister or deregister? I'm not sure. Hello, Xoan. I think we don't need unregister for now, so we skip it. What we really want is then a dispatch function where you can dispatch a specific game event, and that one is simply calling on every listener. It calls the on event function. I think that should be the simplest version. Unregister is the correct term. Okay, then let's do it like this. And can I write here minus equals, right? That should in theory work. So of course that's not perfect, because first of all, in theory you could add here multiple listeners of the same type. So for example, the render system could be registered 2 times, so it gets notified 2 times, which is already quite bad. So list is not correct, or we should have here some error handling. Also, what is also not ideal, for now it's okay, we just have one event here, the map change event. In the future we might have also like player damage event, player jump event, whatever. So for certain things in our games we will have events, and not every listener is interested into all events. So calling then the on event function on every listener, and maybe we have 50 of them and only one of them is interested. So that's not ideal. So in the future, we might want to optimize that. So instead of having a list, maybe we want to have a map where the key is the game event, and the value is then a list of the listeners which are interested into a specific event. Then we don't dispatch a specific event to all of them, we just dispatch it to some of them. Good, and I'm wondering, I think we just called it fire, because I think in Scene2D it's also called fire if you want to fire an event. It's shorter and it sounds better. So for now we go with that simple approach, and now back to our game screen. When the show method is happening. So in here, we want to iterate over all systems of our world. Filter is instance. There we want to check for all systems which are a game event listener. And for all of them, we add them, or we register them as a game event listener. Maybe something like this. So we get here the array of all the systems in the world. We filter for the ones which are game event listeners, and we register them. The benefit of that is that we don't need to call this game event dispatcher register for every system which is a game event listener, so we might forget that. So with that approach here, it's a generic approach, which is better. And now when we load here the asset, we can also use our game event dispatcher. We can fire an event, which is a map change event, and there we pass our tiled map. And finally, back in our render system, we now also make it a game event listener. Then it needs to override the onEvent method, and there we check when event is map change event. Then we want to do something from our map renderer. We want to set the map to the tiled map from our event. So that we will add some more logic, but at least for now, we should hopefully get the same result that we had like half an hour ago, but with the entity component system approach. And that one looks good. Haha! Amazing stuff. It's like 2 or 3 times more complicated than it was before, but it's a good thing that it's like that. So it makes it way easier in the future to add more functionality. Not everything is tightly coupled together. We have dependency injection mechanism, which also works already. Good. That means that part here of day 1 also covered the last thing. So the rendering is actually already working, but the support for background and foreground layer, we don't have that yet. And that's the last thing that we want to add, which should hopefully not be too complicated. What we want to do is, if we want to get all the layers, we want to filter for the, how are they called? Tiled map tile layer, I think. Let me think. Tiled map. What kind of layers are there? Tiled map, tile layer, image layer. So tile layer, I think, is the one that we are currently using for the background and foreground. Then tiled map, image layer is a special object in tiled where you really just set an image directly. You don't work with tiles. You really work with an image directly. We don't use that, I think, so we can ignore it. And there should be a... Shouldn't there also be an object layer? Tiled map, tile map object? No. I thought there was a object layer? Let me quickly check. So we have here extends map layer, and what kind of map layers are there? A group layer, an image layer, and a tile layer. And the tile layer is not extended anymore. The image layer is also not extended anymore. Group layer is that you can group the layers together. I think, yeah, okay, but then I think we have a problem. How would I know? I need to check that. How do I know that this one is an object layer? The tile map renderer internally knows that because it calls the render tile layer. Yes, and isn't there a render objects method somewhere? This one, where this object is not implemented. Correct. Let's download the sources quickly. Render objects. Where did it go? Let me go back to the render system. So in here, get it with layer name. Yeah, I try to avoid that actually. So I don't want to do it by layer name, but maybe it's not possible. Let's see, render objects. Where is it used? Nowhere. Really? Seems like it. So render map layer. There it gets in a layer. If it's a group, then it renders the entire group. If it's a tiled map layer, it renders the tile layer. If it's an image layer, the image layer. And otherwise it renders as an object. So it seems like there is another type of layer, right? Let's make a breakpoint. So what do we have here? We have a tiled map. It has some layers. It has 4 of them. It's just a map layer. Okay, but that means it's not a tiled map tile. The names are so fucking crazy. So it's not a tiled map tile layer. It's just a map layer. So we should be good to go. It's very confusing, but we should be good to go. So we can get all the tiled map tile layers and no, I'm wrong. We need to iterate over all of them. And I think we cannot avoid the name checking. So just what do I want to do? Let me show you. We are here. What I want to know now is what kind of tile layers are in the background of my objects and what are in the foreground. So basically, we have here an object layer. Everything below should be background and everything above should be foreground. We know now that this layer is just a tile layer, and those are called tiled map tile layer. So when we iterate over all the layers of our map, we know at the beginning everything is a background. When we get to one of these object layers, we switch that now everything else will be a foreground layer. It's good enough for me, and I think we can work with that. But I was just thinking maybe you have, I don't know, another object layer in between there for whatever reason, then this entire logic would be screwed. But I think at some point, we just need to come up with certain rules. And that's it. Yeah, we'll do it exactly like you say now, Faith. So we will add everything to the background layers. The first time we see a normal tile layer, we switch. And then we add everything to the foreground layer. So I think this is how we are going to implement it. So what we need is background layers, which is an mutable list of tiled map tile layer, and we have foreground layers. So every time we have a map change event, we want to clear those layers because we get new ones. And then we have this one, and then we iterate through all the layers. And we have like, how do we call it? Layer or current layers, I don't know, which starts with the background layers. So if layer is map layer, so that's the one we have an object layer, switch from background to foreground layer parsing. So our current layers will be the foreground layers. And other than that, simply here we add in the layer that we have. That's a... But why is it a list? Shouldn't it be a... That's a mutable list. That's a mutable list. But somehow it isn't. Found list. I don't get it. I'm confused. Why is it not a mutable list, although it is a mutable list? What's the problem? It's okay. It doesn't know that this is a tiled map tile layer. Yeah, I understand. So the layer is tiled map tiled layer. We are only interested in those. Okay, so we can skip those. That was BS. I interpreted the error message wrongly. Yeah, tiled map tile layer. Grüß Gott. Cop the fish. Okay, is always false. Yes, that's also true. We need to move that to the front because a tiled map tile layer is a map layer, so that one needs to be checked first. And here below we are good. So I also want to switch that to a when statement. Can I do that? Yes, here. And then this becomes a one-liner, and here we have the comment. It's a little bit of nesting, which we can optimize as well. So let's extract that here because I don't like it a lot. Let's call that parse map layers. Then it's easier to read. So when we get a map change event, that one we can also move inside this method. So we assign the map. Then do we even need the event here? No, we can just pass here. We don't need to pass anything, but to make it clear, we can pass the tiled map of the event. Makes it also a little bit shorter. Okay, so does that sound reasonable? So we have here the different layers, blah, blah, blah. Parsing, we switch between foreground and background. And that's it. We will make a breakpoint to analyze that if everything is good. And here now, instead of just calling render, we want to call the render layer. Render, and here, oh, interesting. Do you just pass in the indices of the layers and not the layer itself? Or we can iterate over our layers and pass the layer here directly. What is that one here? This with the integers? Oh, that's a begin render, end render. We don't want that. That one is hopefully without begin and end render. Is that just batching? Blah, blah, tons of math, blah, blah. And batch draw. Okay, so that's the one that we actually need. So we have, first of all, our background layers. And for each map renderer, render tile layer. And we render it. And the same for the foreground layers. And in between here, render entities. That's it. What we don't have now, so we need a call to begin render and a call to end render, and then I think there's one more which will update this. That's this one. So this update animation base time, what that would do if in tiled you can also create animations, which we might use, I'm not sure. But when you set up animations, you usually do that on the tile set directly with this animation editor. There you can add the different tiles and what should be the delay between switching through the different tiles. Then in the end, you get an animation. And in order for that to work, we would need to call this update animation base time, which is a static method. And yeah, that's very easy to fix. Where am I navigating to? I'm confused. So that one we can simply call here. That's not difficult. The more important part is that we really need batch begin and batch end call. And there we have with LibGDX extension, we can call batch use and just push them or move those calls now inside here. That should reduce the amount of flushing as well to 1, and everything should work. One more thing, what is set view doing? It's simply calling batch set projection matrix. It's also updating the view bound of the map renderer itself so that it knows what kind of tiles it needs to render. So we need to keep that, because I was thinking there's a batch use method where you can pass in a camera. But we don't need that because it's done in set view. We update here the animations, we set the view, we have the begin render, we render everything, and here we have the end render. So theoretically, everything should be great. Let's see. Debug. I guess there's a use method on map renderer. That could also be the case. Why didn't I stop? Oh, I didn't have set a breakpoint. Let me check. So background layers, we have 2, which is the ground and the decoration. Yes, that's the background, and foreground is the foreground layer. We have 3 layers, right? Yeah, so that one is working. Foreground is foreground, and we had the 2 background layers. So this parsing of the layers is working perfectly. And is there really a use method? No. No, there isn't, but might actually be a nice extension. Which could be contributed to libGDX, but we don't want to go overboard. We don't do that now. So we will just add it here. Maybe just below here. So we have a private function of the just of a map renderer in general, I would say. use, and there you pass in. We actually really need the orthogonal stuff because we need the camera as well. So the camera, the orthographic camera, and that simply is calling set view camera. Then it is calling the batch begin and the batch end stuff, right? Let me quickly check something. So we have render, that one is begin render, so it's just batch begin. And the end renderer is batch end. That's good. Also this animated stuff, we can also move it down there, which makes it easier. And in the end, we just want to call the map renderer use. I like that. And there we pass the game camera. And what we need some actions. So I'm not sure if it's called actions usually. Is it called like that? Let's be consistent with the LibGDX extension. So we have here, it's called action. Okay. He also internally passes the batch to the rendering, which we actually might need as well. So we can fix that. But yeah, it's just an action. And this is how it's called. He also adds some contract here. Let's don't do that. I think it's rather simple. Okay, so one more thing. So we want to get here a batch. Maybe a sprite batch, I'm not sure. Could be that we want to have the sprite batch here. But we will find that out when we render then the entities. That might be the case. Function T map renderer T. That you get the map renderer directly. Would also be a version that instead of getting here the batch, you actually get the map renderer inside. Maybe that's even more consistent. Not sure. For now, I just want to roll with that. So we just need the batch. Most likely it should be a sprite batch, but we will find that out in the next run. And that's it. So we have game viewport apply, map renderer use, where we pass in the camera. The camera gets set here as the view. We update these counters internally. We call batch begin. We call the actions. I called it plural. I think it was just called an action. So we do then something in here. Instead of it, can we also give that a name? Replace it with explicit. No, that's not what I want. That it is for each, but that one here we would have the batch. Yeah, not sure if we need that. Let's just have it like that for now. Okay, then so we begin it, we call the action with the rendering, and we end it. That should be it. So let's see. Everything's still working. Great stuff. I like it. What we did not add yet. So that one today here, that one is now also 100%. Day one, 100% done. Good stuff. What we did not add yet is a profiler. Let's also GL profiler, I think it's called. That one we want to add as well to see then how many flush calls we have and how many sprite patches are in the patch and yeah, things like that. So to see if all of these optimizations and things that we might to change around in the render system that they are still working. Okay, with that, I think that's it for today. What we can do is we want to share this project, maybe that we can save it. Share project on GitHub. It doesn't need to be private, remote, share it. Sharing is caring. So what do we need to... We don't want to have the raw assets folder. That should actually be... Or should it be there? Not sure, no. Not for now. Should maybe be excluded in the git ignore file. All of that we want to upload with the tiled project. Yeah, blah, blah. That looks good. Some logos. What is that one? The assets itself, the different classes. Looks good. Initial commit add. Okay, let's see. Ta-da! It's there. Oh, one more thing that I remember now. That we also want to add, maybe add GitHub action to automatically compile, test a commit to master. Might also be interesting for some of you that you see how this CI/CD stuff works on GitHub. I'm not an expert with that. I used it from time to time. I need to look it up how I need to implement certain things, but I'm capable of doing that. And I wanted to have that. So at some point, I want to add some tests in this project. And ideally, they just then run every time I add something to the master to be sure that I don't break anything with initial commits. Good. Yeah, I would say I'm happy with what we have achieved today. So we have some basic rendering going on. We have already some tiled map integration. We have asset management. We have game events integration. We have our entity component system set up already, which is quite good. So the next day we will then add those static Box2D collision objects for our map so that we in tiled again for, I think it's for every tile, right? There's a collision editor, exactly. And then in here we can then add some collisions. So where the player, for example, cannot fall through here from the platform. There are no slopes from what I see. Yeah, but so there we will draw some collision stuff. That one we will then also load in our game. And we will then also load the player itself. So spawn game objects is maybe a little bit too much. We just want to spawn the player that is placed in tile and yeah, make it move with some keyboard input listen or something like that. That would be then the day 2 of our journey. Are you going to use Box2D? So yes, I want to use Box2D. It's always a valid question if you should use a physics engine for a simple platformer like that, or if you ship your own. I would definitely recommend, if you never tried to implement it yourself, then implement it yourself. I did that in the past couple of times so that you learn how do you detect if 2 rectangles are colliding with each other, also circle shapes. And then it gets a little bit more complicated when you have polygon shapes. How do you know if they are intersecting? Also, how do you resolve the collision? So normally when you start doing it, it's a very simple approach. So imagine you have a wall and your player is maybe a box and this player is moving towards the wall. So every frame you move it like 10 pixels to the right, and at some point he's intersecting with that wall, so with this line. And a very simple collision handling is that when a player is doing an invalid movement, so he's moving inside the wall, then you simply restore its previous position. So you restore it back then here, so before the wall. That is very simple. And I would totally recommend that you start implementing your own platformer with things like that. It helps you also in the future when you use then like a physics engine or other things, how the math behind that works. And also you will know how frustrating it can get when you come to special cases. So this is a very easy scenario. It's then more complicated when you have like a slope and also again the player. So it's still just checking if you are intersecting with a line, but where do you place the player? Do you move it here or do you move it here when he's falling down? Things like that. Also, if the player is a circle, that's even easier to detect than the collision. Also, what happens when you have some crazy shapes of, I don't know, maybe a star or something like that. So how do you know if you collide with that? An easy approach is, again, that you have then a bounding rectangle, which is checked for collision, and you don't do pixel-perfect collision with things like that. All of that is not that hard to implement, I would say, but still, when it comes into gravity, forces, I don't know, maybe you want to have a wind mechanic in your game where you push the player constantly away. I personally find it easier to just use a physics engine, which comes with a lot of stuff. Also, I think Box2D is easy to use, and especially with the collision callbacks and so on, it's really great and nice to work with. But that's the downside of the physics system. They are implemented to give you realistic physics behavior. And what do we not want to have in our platformer? Realistic physics behavior. So of course, all the jumping, the movement, all of that special behavior that you need to quirk around a little bit with Box2D, do a little bit of tricks here and there to get it working the way you want to work it. And that's also quite frustrating to do. But at least for me, for the simple games that I'm developing, it's good enough, and I know already most of the tricks that I need to do, so it's fine enough. How do you make it possible to jump onto the platform from the bottom and stop at the top? Do you gonna use two fixtures on bottom or on top, or how? That was one of the bigger problems that I had when I implemented my first platformer, but the solution in the end was then actually very easy. As you might know, there is the context listener in Box2D, and there is, let me show it in the code. So there should be a class which is called, I think, context listener. And there is, I cannot remember anymore, I think it's pre-solve or post-solve. I think it's pre-solve, not sure. Any of those methods, they should, no, wait, then it's wrong. That should be a method which returns a Boolean, or do you call that on the manifold? I think it's called on the manifold maybe, that you call then, I don't know, punct collision, dot collision minus false, then there is no collision between two objects. And I just added then the logic in the pre-solve method. So when a character has an velocity y, which is greater than 0, so I think it's greater than 0, which means that he's moving upwards, so he's jumping, then the pre-solving simply will say that when I'm colliding with such a platform in the middle where I want to go through, then it returns false for the collision, so the player can then jump through the platform. And when the velocity is 0 or negative, so when the character is falling, then the collision is enabled with the true flag. So that's actually not so difficult to implement in Box2D, that you can jump through platforms. And let me quickly check, because I really want to give you the correct name of the method. I have so many projects. Where is Mystic Woods? I think there we used Box2D. And luckily, all my projects nowadays are set up usually always the same way. So there's a system, and there should be a physics system. Yep. And it hopefully implements the context listener, which is also great. And there is this one. So that's the method that I wanted to mention. So in the pre-solve method, there you have the context information. And there you just do your logic inside. So you check, is it a static body? Is the other one a dynamic body? The velocity and everything. And in the end, you just say contact is enabled false if the player is moving upwards. So if the velocity y is greater 0. And contact is enabled to true if the velocity is 0 or negative. So if the player is falling. With that one, you can very easily go through platforms. Does it make sense? That is at least something that I used in the past, and that one was working good enough for me. I'm not sure if I have that project on GitHub. I think, and maybe I never uploaded it there. It was not super amazing. No, I think that one was the big one. I need to delete some older projects again. Platformer, I think that one was it. Oh, that was a long time ago. But I think in there I used that approach. But not sure. Did I also have there a physics system back then? Box 2D game object collision system. Is it this one? Not sure. I don't see it. But I think that one was the project where I used this approach. It's a very old one. I don't see any images. Back then I didn't really care a lot about that. But I think in this game you control a little alien character. I think there are 3 or 4 maps if I remember correctly. The controls are really garbage. But that one had already the logic, I think, that you can jump through platforms. And the bigger one, Quilly Adventure, I think that one I'm pretty sure had it as well. So that is a game where I'm really proud of. It's not completely finished, but it had some introduction scene, cut scene, then also boss fights, trigger systems, map events, experience, and all of that stuff. A really cool game. I liked it a lot. I'm very proud of that one. And I think that one also had the possibility that, for example, you could jump on these flying rocks. And if I remember correctly, you can jump through them. But anyway, you will see that we will implement that in this game as well. So you will see how I will solve it. Are you planning to make any tutorial on Korge in the future? I had a look actually at Korge in a couple of months ago when I had some free time. And what I like about it is that it's native Kotlin, and some of its how you write down the syntax. In some ways, I like it more than LibGDX, but also other areas, since I don't have experience with it yet, but some things look a little bit weird to me. I think you had this views, then you need to call the update rate or tick rate or something, which maybe I don't like it. I don't know, since I didn't use it yet. But for sure, I want to try it out. And I thought of that I maybe make a few videos when I have time in the future where I simply try out certain things. So one thing would be Godot. Then maybe just for a couple of hours, 4 or 6 hours. That's maybe too much. Let's say 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours, that I try out something and then at the end give my feedback about it. So my personal opinion. And there I also thought of using Korge for a little tryout project. So most likely not a complete game and a tutorial series, but at least just some tryout that you see how I experience and learn something new, and experience also the troubles and the things that are maybe easier in that engine, and then I will give some feedback at the end. That would be my idea. I usually use category and mask bits. I never use pre-solve. It's the fastest way to do it with category and masks, but they are confusing me all the time, to be honest, because there's this weird logic that when you say, for example, a car can collide with a street and a wall, but the street, I don't know, can only collide with a wall, and then nothing works and nothing collides with anything anymore. There were always these weird behaviors. It's a good documentation on iForce 2D, where I think he has some, tanks and flying objects and things like that, where he introduced this category and mask bit stuff. But for me personally, it's way easier to just use the pre-solve method and use normal coding with my objects and my logic to say if a collision should happen or not. Of course, it's slower, not sure by how much, but for my small little games, it's just a few objects on the screens, and modern hardware is not the limit. So I can write it in an easier to read and understand way, and it will still perform very well. Missing the flippy boss fight. Yeah, we never had that, but I think... is he still? Yeah, here you can see him. So he's in this background here behind the tree. He's still on that screenshot at least. Did you use body joints in any project? Only in some tryout projects. There's also, but I cannot remember it anymore. Was it Billy Boy or something? So there is an article where someone describes how you can create a very good platformer behavior, so Mario-like with Box 2D. And from what I remember, he used, I think, a circle for the head, a circle for the feet, a rectangle in between, and the rectangle and the circle of the feet were connected with a, was it called motor joint or something? So in the end, the bottom circle is then really like a wheel and is then rotating. And that one gave him, I think he also added there a video, that gave him a really good behavior also when you go up slopes or go down slopes, because you are really then like how you call that, a solo wheel or something. So these bikes with just, how do we even call that in German? Einrad, right? Then you have, so that's the one that I mean. I don't know how it's called in English. But you have a behavior like that. So the circle of the feet, that is connected with a joint with the rectangle body. And I think he gives then some force to that motor joint or whatever that is called to get the circle below spinning. And that one is then moving on the ground and up the slopes. And that one looks really good on the videos from the behavior. So at least from the moving to the left and right, that looked really good. But I just experimented a little bit with it, but I don't have good experience with it. We might use that for the player, so that approach that I just described. But at the beginning, most likely it will be a little bit simpler, so without the joints. Goody good. Then, people, I would say I will close the stream now. Thanks for watching and joining. And just for the future, so on Monday, usually I never stream. That's starting of the work, so the beginning of a new week. And I just hate it, and I'm very tired on Monday, so I don't want to stream then in the evening. But Tuesday I will stream again. So there we will develop then the collision object loading, spawning the player, and some basic input handling for the player. That would be the goal. And those streams during the week, so next Tuesday, they are usually then in the evening. So I would say I will start maybe, most likely 6:30 or 7, so Central European time in the evening. And then for, I don't know, 2 or at most 3 hours, that will be the next stream on Tuesday. So if you have time and you're interested, it would be great to have someone there. Other than that, I wish you a nice rest of your Sunday. Have a good day and bye-bye.